Good morning, everybody. Woke up to find another tweet by Stephen Drizzen. He put, "It's out, the Journal of Criminal Law and Criminology's symposium issue. Quote, revisiting voluntariness, seeking clarity in the era of false confessions is now available. The issue contains thought-provoking pieces from, amongst others, Seth Waxman." Let's take a look. Innocent juvenile confessions. I won't read the whole lot. There's one or two bits that piqued my interest. He wrote, "You're 16 years old. You like WrestleMania, animals and video games, but you don't like talking to people, and in fact, you try not to be around them whenever you can, because getting words out is really difficult, and you can't follow what other people are saying with their words or their faces. You're in special education classes at school, and tests have shown that you're borderline disabled. Things got really bad when your uncle was arrested for a murder that everyone has been talking about. Just a few days after he's arrested, the police talk to you, but nothing happens until a few months later, after your cousin says that you've been acting up. So the police bring you back in for 3 different interviews in one day, and on the next day, they take you out of school for another interview. The detectives aren't acting tough, which makes you feel slightly better. They tell you that they're on your side. One even says that he has a kid your age. They're telling you all kinds of stuff about the murder, stuff you did and that your uncle did. But they're also quizzing you on it, and they're acting upset when you don't get the right answer. So you guess, and you guess, until you get it right, because you don't like quizzes, and it's better if you get the right answers so you can leave. After you've been sitting with the detectives forever, they tell you all the stuff that you've admitted to, all the right answers you've given, and you agree with them because you really just want to leave and get back to school in time for your 6th period class. You've got a project due, but you don't get to leave. You're arrested and you're scared, and you're really confused, telling your mum that the detectives had got to your head. And because you agreed with the things about helping your uncle with the murder, you're put in jail for the rest of your life. Millions of, well, he's put Americans, I would correct that and put millions of people around the world, are familiar with the story of Brendan Dassey. They've watched the video interrogation. In lots of ways, his confession is as comprehensible as it is heartbreaking, meaning it's understandable, maybe even unsurprising, that an adolescent with severe social and intellectual limitations, who is subjected to hours of 2-on-1 interrogations with no lawyer, not that Len Kaczynski would have helped at all in the situation, no parent, no support of any sort, would confess to something he didn't do. But we know that false confessions don't come only from people like Brendan, people with intellectual and social limitations, or people with no real conception of the legal system or their rights. Take Marty Tancliffe, an affluent teenager who wakes up on what's supposed to be his first day of senior school to find his mother dead. She's been slashed and bludgeoned, and his father bleeding heavily in his home office. Immediately he calls 911 and begins to administer first aid to his father. When the police arrive, Marty identifies the likely suspect, his father's business partner, who had run up a $500,000 debt to his father, had recently threatened his parents, and had been at the Tancliffe home late the night before. Police take Marty to the station, where they tell him that they've found forensic evidence linking him to the crime, his hair on his mother's body. Eventually, one of the detectives leaves the room, and when he returns, he lies to Marty, telling him that his father had woken up from a coma and accused his son of murdering his mother. In fact, his father never did wake up and eventually died from his injuries. What's Marty's response to the detective's lie? He asks, "Could I have blacked out and done it? Could I be possessed?" One of the detectives tell him, "I think that's what happened to you." So Marty confesses, immediately recanting and refusing to sign the partial confession the detectives had prepared. Marty is convicted of murdering both his parents anyway. Sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. By the time he was exonerated, he had spent half his life in prison. Stories like Marty's are piling up. Accounts of people subjected to psychological coercion who falsely confess to a crime only to be exonerated years later. Reaching adolescents and adults, the poor and the affluent, the disabled and the high functioning. These stories raise a critical question. How could we have accepted their confessions as proof of their guilt? The answer may be as simple as the steadfast belief held by many, including lawyers, law enforcement officials and judges, that people who are innocent don't confess. One of the prosecutors spoke that very line to the jury that convicted Brendan Dassey. The only problem with that last line there, I would take huge exception with the idea that it's one of the prosecutors. Let's be quite clear who we're dealing with, as having said innocent people don't confess. Of course, we are talking about somebody who I would label as corrupt. I would label him the corrupt Assistant Attorney General of Wisconsin, Tom Fallon. He's effectively everybody's boss. Now we know that Tom Fassbender, who works as an investigator for the Department of Justice under Tom Fallon, kept a CD of an index to the computer that in fact was labelled as Brendan's computer. He kept it in his own personal possession for 12 years. Now, did I miss the part in Making a Murderer where Tom Fallon apologises to Kathleen Zellner for the CD being kept in his staff's personal possession for over 12 years? Did I miss the bit where Tom Fallon explains to Kathleen Zellner that he will give her a full explanation as to why it was being held in his possession? Or did I miss the bit where Tom Fallon explains what punishment of Tom Fassbender will be implemented? Did I miss the bit where he says that Stephen Avery will be immediately released, and we will fully investigate what's going on? I don't think I missed any of that, did I? Did he and Norm Garn hand back quarry bones to the Holbachs that were supposed to be discussed as being handed over for testing? Did they hand them back years earlier? Kathleen Zellner, early on in Making a Murderer, describes Tom Fallon, the person who said innocent people don't confess, described him as ethical. Well, what does ethical mean? It means morally good or correct. It means avoiding activities or organisations that do harm to people. I don't think that fits Tom Fallon. Let's have a look. Corrupt. Having or showing a willingness to act dishonestly in return for money or personal gain, evil or morally depraved, made unreliable by errors or alterations, or in a state of decay, rotten and putrid. I think that quite adequately describes Mr. Tom Fallon. I think, for me, we know that Brendan was coerced. We can see it immediately. It's so painfully obvious. The question is, why? Why was he coerced? Well, we know for a fact that they Tom Fassbender and Mark Wheatgrit tried to put a lot of pressure on Stephen Avery's fiancée, Jodie. But she was not willing to play ball because there was nothing for her to talk about. So she told them to go away. That's when they went after Brendan. The reason why they went after Brendan was in order to frame Stephen Avery. We know, and Millbilly has been putting out all these jail calls, and in conversations I've had with him, he's mentioned on more than one occasion that the jail calls from Stephen Avery highlight the fact that he talks about the fact that when he was at the bonfire, Brendan was with him. When they knew that Brendan was Stephen Avery's alibi, that's the moment they thought, we need to nullify, get rid of this alibi. That is the reason why Brendan was coerced. We need the why. Now, okay, I might be wrong. Maybe, as I say, Kathleen Zellner said early on in Making a Murderer, maybe Tom Fallon is an ethical prosecutor. Although, he's not just a prosecutor, he is the Assistant Attorney General, one of the most powerful people in Wisconsin. And as I say, I don't think that he's ethical at all. I might be wrong, but maybe you can correct me on that. So let's have a look at one other paragraph here. Let's do this. Behind these stories is a mountain of social science explaining why, contrary to popular belief, innocent people do confess. Take perhaps the most obvious factor, age. Simply put, young people think differently than adults. The brain's prefrontal cortex, which is essential to developing certain cognitive functions like foresight, cost-benefit assessment, and making decisions that require thinking about multiple sources of information at once, does not develop until late in adolescence. Unable fully to appreciate the long-term consequences of their actions and unfamiliar with the legal system, children and teenagers are more likely to confess in exchange for what they think will be an immediate benefit, like ending an interrogation, going back to home, or in Brendan's case, getting back to class. Let's have a look at this one now. Yes. When it comes to juvenile confessions, the court's silence, the Supreme Court's silence, is problematic, not only because we would like prevailing case law on the topic to reflect the evolving science behind involuntary confessions. The silence is problematic because it has also permitted lower courts to be derelict in enforcing the greatest care standard. With the dearth of recent cases from the court, I had hoped the justices would see Brendan's petition as a perfect opportunity to bring the law and the lower courts in line with the reality of involuntary juvenile confessions. Brendan's was the rare case where his interrogation and confession were videotaped. There is no dispute about what was said, what tactics were or were not used. His failure to grasp the magnitude of the situation is on full view, as is his struggle to correctly answer the detective's leading questions. Which again begs the answer, why didn't SCOTUS want to hear Brendan's case? I'm afraid this corruption, as far as I can see, runs all the way up the food chain. I think what's needed is to highlight slightly more aggressively and fully explain. Just to say a prosecutor said that. As I say, it wasn't just a prosecutor. It's the Assistant Attorney General of Wisconsin who said that. Somebody who has been responsible for trying to give Kathleen Zellner a runaround for the last 2 years. It's just corruption. I personally would like to see, as I say, a little bit more aggression, a little bit more bulldog spirit, and tell it the way it is. I think starting with the why was Brendan coerced would be a good starting point. That's my opinion. Okay, let me know whether you think that Tom Fallon is corrupt or ethical, and catch you again soon. Bye for now.